Gyomei is the stone-hard big brother of the group, always caring and taking care of others. But does anyone ever take care of Gyomei? It's like this meme. Here are the 10 saddest facts about our stone hashira that'll make you cry. Like, what if I told you that Gyomei wasn't always blind? Well, let me tell you that in the second official fan book, it was revealed that Gyomei was blinded because of a fever he had back when he was a child. That's right, he wasn't born blind. High fevers can sometimes trigger inflammatory reactions in the body that affect the eyes, such as optic neuritis, which can cause vision loss. The thing is, this really isn't common, so you can imagine just how neglected he must have been during his childhood and how much he suffered for a simple fever to turn him blind. Next, there's more about Gyomei's parents. Most Demon Slayer fans already know that he was an orphan who looked after other orphans, but not many fans know about his backstory from before that. You see, in the fanbook, we also learned about Gyomei's parents. Unfortunately, his mother died during childbirth, and his father died in an epidemic. Now, considering that, we can assume that this epidemic is also what's responsible for Gyomei's fever that resulted in him going blind in both eyes. Well, this brings us to the next one, and this is gonna get sadder the more you think about it. Before he lost his sight, Gyomei's eyes must have seen death and suffering unlike anything a child's mind can imagine. If his father died in the epidemic, it's fair to assume that many of the ones close to him must have also experienced some tragic suffering during this plague. The fanbook mentioned that Gyomei had other family members who also died because of unknown circumstances. Who knows, maybe they also died due to this outbreak. The point is that before losing sight in his eyes, Gyomei must have seen his friends, relatives, and his own father die because of the same illness that gave him the fever and took his eyes. And of course, from there on out, the memories of those sights must have never left his mind, and thus were the last things he ever saw. Honestly, it's crazy how hard of a life Gyomei has lived. And what's even crazier is how he manages to accept all this, wearing his heart on his sleeve despite experiencing things that would give just about anyone lifelong trauma. To understand this better, we gotta talk about the next fact. You must have noticed that Gyomei is constantly cosplaying as a waterfall on and off screen. The thing is, he has a habit of crying at almost anything. Even if it's just some litter thrown on the ground by some punk, he'll shed tears, recite Namu Amida Butsu, and forgive his ignorance. Heck, even if it's just a cute cat, it'll be enough reason for Gyomei to shed some manly tears. He's pure of heart despite the cruel ways of this world. I'm sure if it was Gyomei watching this video, he must have already cried 4 times by now. He also would have subscribed already. Be like Gyomei. Next, how do you think Gyomei survived after losing his sight? This was explained in the second fanbook. Even without his eyes, Gyomei's sixth sense allowed him to see through malicious people. You see, after people realized that Gyomei had gone blind, they tried to scam him and do horrible things to him. For example, it's canon that there were kids who would throw rocks at him and try to make him trip. Because bullying is so cool, right? However, much to their surprise, Gyomei would always see through their evil intentions and evade them effortlessly. This led to people cursing him and even calling him a liar, because from their perspective, how can a blind person do what Gyomei does? Despite all this, Gyomei still only has a heart that strives to help others. Now, let's talk about how when Gyomei fought the demon with his bare hands, and later Sayo told the villagers that he killed everyone. Have you ever wondered about why Gyomei never tried to prove his innocence? He could have explained the situation to the villagers. There could have been someone who would have listened. So why? This is because he was all alone after his parents and relatives died. He had to fend for himself while being called a liar by others, just because he was able to see through their awful intentions. This is why he didn't defend himself or explain the situation to the villagers. His subconscious had already made peace with the fact that everyone would call him a liar. And if he defended himself and turned out to be speaking the truth, that would make Sayo a liar, and that probably would be too much for him to bear. This is the mentality of Gyomei. The next one is about how he became a hashira after only 2 months of becoming a demon slayer. We know how hard Gyomei trains. He trained so hard that unlike the other hashira, he was sensible enough to make his training optional. But we have to keep in mind that most of the other hashira spent their lives at Tsukukos, and it likely took them years to get this strong. However, Gyomei was just a blind teenager running a temple until the incident happened. Even in his flashback, we see how he always gave the scarce food that he had to the rest of the kids and was a twiggy, thin man. And this guy was able to transform into a physically massive BFG hashira within 2 months of joining the Demon Slayer Corps. It's like when you get heartbroken, you start hitting the gym. The same happened with Gyomei. Training was the only healthy outlet for him to properly process his emotions and thank his savior Abuyashiki. And so, in those 2 months, he trained so hard that he became the kind of demon slayer the likes of whom even Kokushibo hadn't seen in almost 300 years. Next, we'll have to go straight to the climax of the battle against Upper Moon 1 Kokushibo. Remember how Gyomei told Sanemi in chapter 179 that they have to keep moving forward until Muzan, the king of demons, is destroyed? This was right after Genya's death. And of course, Sanemi's mind and heart just broke into pieces after Genya's death. But we have to understand that Gyomei must have felt similar. Genya was his closest disciple. In fact, there are enough reasons to believe that no other demon slayer was as close to Gyomei as Genya. Genya knew about Gyomei's personality. He knew that Gyomei is a poor explainer with a golden heart. He knew he was crazy tough and harsh with his training methods. For Gyomei, he must have been like a little brother, just like the kids from the temple. However, in that moment, Gyomei found the courage to be strong and also propel Sanemi to be strong too. He always had to be the big brother of the group, even in the moments when he wanted to crumble himself. And this was a bit of a loophole as it was left out of the official story. But have you ever wondered what would happen if Gyomei learned how the kid who let the demon in went on to become an Upper Moon demon himself? Gyomei is a pure and sympathetic person who understands that young people are innately selfish. But what if he came face to face with Kaigaku and learned the truth about who the demon actually is? Would he still be able to cry it off? Or will he get angry like the time he fought Muzan and Kokushibo? Naturally, it's the latter. Kaigaku will be cooked. But what's more important is the emotional toll it would have taken on Gyomei. One of the orphans he raised not only became the cause of the deaths of 7 others, but also went on to become a demon himself. That kind of information may finally break Gyomei. This leads us to the next fact. The reason the author didn't write a confrontation between Kaigaku and Gyomei is because it would have been difficult for her to continue with Gyomei's storyline and also make him fight Kokushibo and Muzan in the same arc. The authors understand their characters better than the fans, and Gotoge-sensei has already been particular about how Gyomei cries about just about anything. A proper confrontation with Kaigaku may have emotionally incapacitated Gyomei, and he wouldn't have been able to continue to arrive in style for the Kokushibo-Muzan fight. And don't forget, in chapter 143, we learned that Gyomei once saved Shinobu and her older sister Kanai from a demon. This was back when Shinobu was really young. So young that she doesn't even remember what exactly happened. But of course, she has a lot of respect for Gyomei because he saved her and her sister. The thing is that the Kocho sisters used to remind Gyomei of the children from the temple. A heart-wrenching thought from him is that these are those whose happiness hasn't yet been destroyed, and so he strived to protect them. Sadly, Shinobu's happiness was soon destroyed years later. He felt horrible after Kanai lost her life. Which is why, following the Hashira meeting, Gyomei wanted to tell Shinobu, "Don't go dying on me." His sixth sense must have already been able to tell that Shinobu had made up her mind to do something extremely reckless, and so he wanted to tell her to stay alive, but he couldn't. Despite the fact that he wears his heart on his sleeve, Gyomei failed to get the words out. If you guys enjoyed this and want to keep crying like Gyomei, check out these other sad Demon Slayer facts that'll make you sob.